Principles of the Infinite Way class, March 13, 1996. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This class is going to be very interesting. I have no idea what's going to get said here tonight. The topic is the nature of the mind, and this is the foundation of the principles of spiritual supply and the principles of healing, spiritual healing, and it's the foundation of how the world works. And this is the center point of this class. All the stuff up until now has been sort of basic axioms and rules, which maybe we'll be able to see imply what we're going to say tonight. But this is the most interesting, the center of the whole thing. And before we dive in, a couple of things from last week. The question came up a couple of times about the difference between Robert who doesn't heal and a Joel who does heal. In the original text, Joel ministry was healing, and Robert, to my knowledge, never heals. And it came to me that night after class what the difference there is. Jesus talks about being in the world but not of it, being a person who is, physically walking through the world, not reacting to anything at all. And the difference between a Robert and a Joel is the extent to which they're in this world. Yes, physically there is a body in the world in both cases. But Joel was very much more in that body than Robert is. As Robert ever was. So the distinction is how much are you in the world? To what extent are you associated with that body? And to the extent that some power or some entity, but to the extent that I'm associated with this body, I am associated with the other bodies, and it seems like compassion comes in there somewhere. I think the reality is that Joel was probably the more compassionate person. All those words. Robert is love, pure love. Being around Robert is very much a love experience, but the word compassion doesn't seem to come up. Robert goes wherever his body goes, and he does whatever the body does, and the play unfolds exactly the way it unfolds, and it's unfolded with great love, and it's a great conduit of love. But there's no question of healing or fixing or being in it or any of it being real. And Joel had lots of experiences in which he had the perception of oneness, especially during very high times of meditation, but he always came back to this world. During the last few years, very difficult for him to be continually brought back here and have to teach. But I think the answer is one of how related they are to the world. The Eastern tradition is a much more sterile and separate tradition than the Western Christian tradition. Jesus was a very passionate person and a healer, and he kicked people out of the temple and went around, and that was what he was doing. The other thing that I thought was worth saying explicitly, I know that 2 or 3 of you, and it's true for me too, lots of people have been going through a lot this week. And everything which is here is God and His harmony. That's not surprising. This class is definitely stirring the pot, as is the Friday night group that's going out here, as is the Sunday night group that's coming here and listening to Joel tapes. Consciousness is being stirred, and consciousness is being overturned, and just being here is stirring the pot. We're all changing, and we are confronting truths that really weren't taught publicly. They were taught in mystery schools, in very quiet mystery schools where there were great oaths of secrecy, and if you ever told, they'd kill you and stuff like that. All these truths used to be kept very secret, and now they're being stated explicitly. And we are saying things like disease has no reality, it has no power to maintain itself. It's illusory. And in the saying of that out loud, there is a reaction. There's a reaction to good, which the corresponding reaction is evil. As people get higher and more saintlier, then the terrorism also gets more and more radical. As people get freer, people get more oppressive. There's always a reaction. The human world is duality. That's what duality is all about. And as we are going higher, the world will fight harder to challenge us. And so it will not be surprising, should not be surprising to us to discover that we are tested. How is this possible? It's like, oh yeah, is that so? Well, here's this. The Friday night flashcard, thank you, Father. The Friday night group has a flashcard every week saying that we all take out with us into the world each week, and we confront whatever confronts us with the flashcard. And the flashcard had been last week, thank you, Father, I need do nothing about this. And what happened to me was that my hard disk crashed on my computer. And for a week or so before, my backup mechanism had not been working properly, and I knew I should back up, but I wasn't able to, and then the hard disk crashed. And the question is, can you sit here and look at this and say, thank you, Father, I need to do nothing about this, And I know other people, if they're interested in sharing and confronted with the stuff which corresponds to their own Achilles heels. If anybody'd like to talk about that, it's not necessary now, but the fact is that is going on. Everybody should be aware that it's going on, and people should be aware that it's not going to stop. And he probably hears it yapping. The thing to do is stand firm. Know your principle. In fact, work on that principle. Make whatever conscious contact with God you can make, but stand on that principle and find out if it's true. For me, it was really quite simple to do. I mean, I really don't care about that kind of thing anymore, and everything will get typed back in that needs to be typed back in, and if it doesn't, it doesn't matter anyway. I don't have any illusion that anything about my life is tied up in that area, so that was an old idea, and it's not an idea anymore, that has nothing to do with me anymore, and so it wasn't that much of a challenge, but a couple of years ago it would have been a sort of great angst. How am I going to fix this? How am I going to fix that? My livelihood depends on it, that kind of thing. Now my reaction is, well, apparently my livelihood doesn't depend on it. If it did, it would be there. So the principle is stand firm. Let's find out if these principles are true or not. This is a laboratory where you've got spiritual principles that are our best idea as to what truth is. The promise is that the truth will set you free. These are our best ideas about what truth is. Let's find out whether or not they're true. If they are, we will grow by getting them reaffirmed. If they're not, we will grow by learning this fact. And so the thing to do is stand on your spiritual principles. Anybody want to talk about that? Yeah, I got
we renting a place up in the West Valley.
See things incorrectly, and you're
late in the checks.
And we all,
last 3 or 4 months.
To some extent, sharing consciousness.
I was away.
What I believe reinforces what you believe, reinforces what I believe, what mankind has believed over the centuries.
I opened it up, and out popped one check.
People that are alive today, I believe,
Things are supposed to, for
connected
$200,
with
they're supposed to pay us
the human aspect of consciousness, just as the one that's in the consciousness of God is.
this money. I instantly went to,
We relate to this
mine went
consciousness,
to,
and it infiltrates us. Joel talks.
they're gonna walk out. No, they're not gonna walk out. They're gonna squat for a while and then walk out.
I don't know if Joel
Knew this was
somewhere
going.
they're on that trail. On one South Sea Island,
And then
there
I
were
used the
monkeys,
last part. I
and they taught these monkeys to wash their food
It was a monumental struggle
and
for
then
me.
they traveled
And
to another island
what
some 30 miles away, and
What happened
the
was-
monkeys there washing their food.
on Monday, Dulcie came back on Sunday.
The monkeys did not phone each other up.
We talked about it as well. I'm gonna call them.
That would be a demonstration of a consciousness of monkey consciousness. It's in that
Looked up
sense
in
that
there,
I
and there was another
am.
check
And
for the
it feels to me, in my
$800.
experience,
It was all there.
that there's
And it was
all different levels
so classic.
of human consciousness. There's
Nothing was wrong, and I was just
male
went for
consciousness and a female consciousness and an American consciousness
and
and
that's kind of
Californian consciousness and a Hermosa Beach
hope I never
consciousness.
forget that
It's
one.
different
I hope not either.
There's a man stag consciousness. There's a different consciousness in every man.
Similar, like Course in Miracles says, love brings up everything and let itself to be released. Talks a lot about. And this sounds like truth brings up everything and lets itself to be released.
Yeah, it is an experience. I've encountered this many times. It does happen. At this point, it's just don't
The group that
be
I'm
frightened or
sitting
concerned
in
by it. Drop all concern. Stand firm.
My
Watch it. Watch it unfold. I'm looking at everybody. There's at least four of you here who, four of us here who had interesting weeks that ordinarily would have challenged us.
Well, I called Leah because I told him that ever since I've been doing the Principles of the Infinite Way and spiritual healing, I've been sicker than I've ever been in my life. That there's so much illness coming up, and it's amazing. I haven't had the flu in 10 years, and I've had it twice in the last month. So I called him up and said, I can't believe this, and he just chuckled. And in fact, Sunday morning, it wasn't even flu. I woke up with this eye that was out here like swollen shut. And I'm thinking, I don't even believe this. And the part of it's so hard for me is I know that it's not real. I mean, I know intellectually that it's a lie, it's not real, that there's no such thing. And yet, I'm flat in bed with this swollen eye trying to stand firm in that principle. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm not thrown, it's not throwing me on the ground like anything in my life used to be, but it's interesting to watch it happening.
There's no question of that.
And somebody commented to me about advertising you're having the flu, and this person's comment was, well, they have flu shots. She goes to school every year and she's around all these students that have flu, and she doesn't take a flu shot, and she should expect the flu. And I'm just sitting there inside my mind saying, no. I didn't say it to that person, but I said, no, that's hypnotism. That's worldwide. That's the source. That's the problem. That's the nonsense. May you experience flu for 10,000 lives.
So our beliefs.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I never associate that. Well, I've been really sick lately. The same thing, and I'm starting to get it again the last 2 days. And not only that, but the food obsession is terrible for the last week. And I'm wondering where it came from. What happened to me was
we all believe
last week I shared that the insurance company had said that I had a pre-existing condition of migraine.
and that they were paying for about $50,000 worth of hospital. Nothing in St. Peter for 12 days. None of my neurological problems, which is everything but my heart surgery, for a month in the hospital. Last week I talked to the woman. I started getting crazy when I talked to her, and I hung up and I came to this class and I realized that I believe on a very deep level that this woman, this nurse that was doing my review, had power over me. That she was more powerful than God. And once I realized that, I was all right. I just dropped it. And is that so? Well, it was just okay. It was just like I had to do some footwork, but I didn't feel torn by it. And so I called and left a message. I called my cardiologist and I left a message for her. And I said, what do I have to do to heal? And I was just so glad I was fine. And today she called me and she said, Adele, I was in a seminar yesterday. She's Jackie. She said, I found out about this new law in California only that says if you've had continual insurance, even if you switch insurance company, that pre-existing clauses do not apply. We're paying for everything. And it's like, I didn't count that so much. And I was just sitting there and I thought, the thought that came to me was, you really do think it's that law, don't you? It was fine. But once I really believed it, I just felt entirely that this woman had, this insurance company did not have power over me. That they couldn't make me anything. And after she hung up, she was going to do some research, and usually I'd be going crazy. And I was wondering, I just waited. Okay, well, what should I do next? Just amazing. But I never connected to being sick and all that stuff coming out.
There is a serious crack in the hypnotism going on here.
So this is the food thing too, Adele, this last week.
Those principles
it just came so strong. I mean, it was so.
Humanhood belief system.
What's going on? And it is that. I am getting further. And that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there will be a reaction.
Me too.
But that's good. We get strong and get done with this. Well, let's start the nature of the mind. A lot of this, there's a lady, Margaret Johnson, in Atlanta, Georgia, and I heard a class that she did on the nature of the mind, and I'm going to read from that before the evening's out, and some next week too. She all of a sudden was just saying so clearly everything that I sort of knew but hadn't seen laid out so clearly, and I was just very impressed with how sweetly she says it and how clearly she says it, and what a really neat lady she has to be. And she was presenting some material that she had presented to her class 20 years earlier. And there were new people there, but there were people who had been in the class for 20 years. And she said to the new people, don't worry about it. You're not different than the others. None of them got it anyway. And she then proceeds to give this 1-hour class. And I listened to that class, maybe 5 minutes at a time. I would listen to like 5 minutes or 8 minutes, and then I would turn it off and take it into meditation and think about it, and then move on another 3 minutes. And I'm just sitting there saying, and they didn't get it this time either, Margaret, And so I worked with it very slowly. And now it's all in place, and I have the problem of wondering, well, what was so confusing? What's so hard about it? So it's your job now to stay with me tonight and not let me go too fast, because, only a month ago, or 6 weeks ago when I first encountered that tape, I had to crawl through it. And now it just seems obvious to me I've already lost that feeling of what the problem was with it. So I'm going to sort of present the material. And of course we can discuss it as it goes or not, but then I'm going to read, I transcribed most of that tape on a second pass through it, and I'm going to start reading those paragraphs, and we should read and talk about, we'll do it a paragraph at a time for a while, because I really do think this is the heart of this class, and let's see what unfolds. It should be fun. The words, the vocabulary has 4 words: consciousness, mind, intellect, and intuition. And all we really need to do is understand what those 4 functions are and how they interrelate. And all the information is there. Now, consciousness is a word we've been using. Consciousness, and all of this, this whole discussion is limited to individual consciousness, individual mind. We're not talking about group mind or world mind or anything like that. It gets way too confusing if we start getting multiple spouts out of that funnel and seeing where they overlap and don't overlap and interrelate and all that sort of thing. So we'll just talk about one person. My consciousness is an individualization of God's consciousness. And when I talk about consciousness, that's what I mean. I mean that consciousness of me, which is an individualization of God consciousness. In Genesis 1, it said man was created in God's image, and that's what it meant. It meant that man, and man isn't the right word there, but that we are consciousness, exactly as God is consciousness. And the important thing from the viewpoint of this whole mind structure is that God gave us His creativity, as well as the fact that we're spiritual and share the nature of God in every other respect. The individual conscious mind is creative. It can manifest. It does manifest. So, the first rule of this whole thing is that consciousness creates. Now, consciousness is impersonal, even though it's my consciousness. The consciousness, the godliness of the consciousness is impersonal. The amount of consciousness that is functioning in my life is a result of my awareness. That's my connection. And consciousness is very much the reality that I create is very much influenced by other influences. Okay, mind is the interesting thing. Mind, the function of mind is to form. Mind produces the forms that we see. Mind creates matter, forms matter. The consciousness created it. The idea is there from consciousness. Mind forms. Margaret talks about mind as being space, or space as being mind. She talks about all this space around us as being mind. That mind is the substance of space. And I think of it a little differently, but it really means exactly the same thing. All that there is that you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell is mind. And whether you think of space as being made out of mind and all those things being made out of mind, or whether you think of space and all those things being images within mind, it doesn't make any difference. I have always thought of it as being within mind. I think of images as a creation within my mind, an image within my mind, and I think of space as that mental requirement to separate images, and I think of time as that mental requirement to give sequence to images, but it's all happening within the mind. And what we have to deal with is two things. When you dream at night, you have a dream, and in that dream there's time and space and reality and objects and forms and matter and all these things. And when you wake up the next morning, none of that is there. The question is, where was it? Okay? It was in your mind. So there is the picture that I use, and that's why I see mind, things as being formed within mind, because we would all agree that that matter had no reality. That matter wasn't out there. That matter didn't have any, didn't take up any space. I mean, there never was that planet. There never was that purple sky. There never was that city. These things did not take up any space. Those objects never existed. Those people didn't have to be buried, the ones that were in my dream. All of that just had no reality. It was purely a creation in my mind as I slept. And it's very easy to see that and accept that. Also, as far as time is concerned, the dream may have apparently had a duration of an hour or 10 years or something like that. And if you were on a EKG or an ECG or whichever one measures brain waves, the brain activity might have lasted a second. So even the time was a creation of, or was formed in the mind. It was a creation of my consciousness, which needed to express itself. It expressed itself in that dream. It used the mind to form that dream. Now, we think of this as being, we think of our mind as being inside our skull, and we think of this as being outside of our skull. And so we like to do this differently now. We say, well, that space in mind is really that space, and when it's in my dream, it's in my, then everything is in my mind. But I would point out that the mind can't be in my skull. My skull is one of those objects in my mind. My body is one of those objects in my mind. I am an object in my mind exactly as the tulips or the space reaching all the way to Tokyo are in my mind. My brain is in my mind. That organ up there that supposedly is the seat of this consciousness is an object formed by my mind, created by my consciousness, and it is not the source of this. It is the effect. The brain is one of the effects of the consciousness-mind tandem. It's all just mind. And there's no way that we can... And what Robert would say is, he says, when you wake up in the morning, how sure are you that that dream you had last night was a dream? And you say, yeah, I mean, I know. It's not a matter of sure or not sure or pretty sure. I know that was a dream. I woke up, my heart was pounding and all that, but there I was in my bed. I was not in Cairo or wherever I was dreaming about. I know that was a dream. And Robert says, as a result of my experience, I am awake. I know that this is a dream. In exactly that same sense is what he's trying to say. That he knows in the sense that I know that what I dreamt last night is a dream. He knows in exactly that surety of knowledge that what he's experiencing or what he's observing as a body doing something is a dream. That's why he is so detached from this. The idea of Robert healing would be like the idea of you're trying to heal somebody in a dream. If you really believe you're in the dream, then you're a compassionate person, then you're helping the people in your dream, you're healing them. But if all the time that dream is going on, you're absolutely aware, this is not a dream, this is not real, this is just a dream, I know it's a dream, none of this is happening, we have no reality at all, I wonder when the hell I'm going to wake up. then there's no healing function going on for yourself or anyone else. I mean, what do you care what the body's doing there? You know you're going to wake up momentarily. It's immaterial. Okay, now, mind is pure. Mind doesn't edit. Mind doesn't have any good or evil about it. Mind doesn't do anything. Mind forms exactly what is in consciousness. It's my mind, it's my world, it's reflecting my consciousness. I am getting mirrored back to me what my current state of consciousness is. And the obvious corollary of that is, therefore, the better the content of consciousness, the better the 3D experience. But mind is not an active thinking thing. It makes no decision or anything. Mind must form what is in consciousness. It will always do that. And so we change our reality by changing our consciousness. That's why I have said for so long to some of you, work on your consciousness. Nothing else has any meaning. Work on your consciousness. As a comment, mind is the only power in the 3D world. We talk about there is no power other than God, but from the viewpoint of the 3D world, the only power there is mind, because God is not in the 3D world. God is in the 4D world. God may well be the content of consciousness, which is affecting the appearance of, which is affecting what is formed by mind in the 3D world. But the only power that's happening out in your 3D world is mind, is your belief, is your content of your consciousness. And the most vicious corollary in all of the infinite way stems directly from this. Nothing can happen in your experience that is not a direct outpicturing of your state of consciousness. That is I think, toughest fundamental axiom in AA, in infinite way, but also the one that gives us life. It's like I got it in AA to a very slight extent when I first got to AA. I got the fact that they weren't doing it to me, that I was doing it, and that implies the responsibility. I've been doing this to me all this time, and the terrible responsibility, but it also for the first time introduces the possibility of doing something about it. And in fact, it gives me total power to do something about it. The good news is that we have dominion over the content of our consciousness. We can develop dominion over the content of our consciousness. Nelson?
Yeah, I guess the question is, in B you were talking about consciousness, individualization of God consciousness. So is that done? I mean, is our consciousness, is it supposed to be cooked?
There is only one consciousness. Think of the funnel again, think of the spout. The consciousness is all God. The width of the spout is not done.
Right, so in using the analogy of the spout, is it the consciousness in the void or is the consciousness in the eye?
I is the consciousness.
Okay, so it's in the spout. Okay.
And I is also the void. Trying to draw a distinction is a hard thing to do. I need to get a shirt or something. Really cool. Okay, sure. Thanks. Sitting here drinking iced coffee and wondering why I'm getting so cold. consciousness. And there is an individualization, which is us, as long as we think we're separate. As our awareness grows, the separateness of us from God disappears, and the spout gets wider and wider, and at some point the term spout has no meaning anymore because it's all of it.
Now, I guess the distinction is, do you make the distinction, the same distinction that Barbara does between awareness and consciousness?
Yes.
Okay. So then, okay.
Yes. I mean, the amount of consciousness in your life, the amount of consciousness which is functioning in your life is a result of your awareness. And we'll see that tonight. We'll get to that. When Margaret says intuition, she means awareness. So the fourth function that we're going to talk about tonight is the awareness faculty.
Who is Margaret again?
Her name is Margaret Johnson. She's a student of Joel Goldsmith. She was with Joel from 54 to 64 and started teaching thereafter. And she's just as clear as a bell. What can I say? She's just very clear. I may have to go down there at the end of April and spend a weekend with her just to hang out with that lady while she's still bothering to wear that body, because it's pretty clear she can drop it whenever she feels like she wants to. She's probably close to 70. She was a Goldsmith student and a mother of a 13-year-old in 1964. All right, so that's sort of an intro to mind. Let me move on to intellect now. Let me at least tonight get through the four terms and their functions, and then we'll be in a position then we'll spend at least the whole class next week talking about it and using it and going through Margaret's stuff, and there's some wonderful stuff. Having finally gotten the clarity on this from Margaret, she started reading a couple of paragraphs out of The Thunder of Silence, and I discovered that Joel wrote all this stuff down back in 1958 or 59, but when I read The Thunder of Silence, I wasn't able to read this. I didn't get it. Like the big book changes, well, The Thunder of Silence has changed too. That, by the way, is the Infinite Way source book on mysticism and the nature of mind and things like that, is The Thunder of Silence. It's definitely the highest teaching of the Infinite Way books. And it's amazingly clear now that I'm clear enough to hear it. He really cleaned that up since the last time I read it. All right, now, the intellect is an adjunct of the mind. It works sort of like part of consciousness. Its function in this whole thing is to interpret. It sees what mind has formed, and it interprets it. The picture is sort of consciousness is creating, mind is forming, and the intellect is receiving the data and interpreting it to us. And that's an important thing, it's interpretation. And I'll get back to that. But I want to just hit the other points about it. It is the storehouse of all of our human experience. And I'm talking about lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of human experience, not just this lifetime. But it's a great repository of that information about human experience. And that's all it knows. It has all the script information is in there. It has all the information that says we have to fend for ourselves, that we should be coming from fear, that we're going to get killed, that we've got to, self-preservation. It's got all the beliefs in good and evil. It's got all of that stuff in it. And it has some survival value, and therefore is given a great deal of credence by us. Because A, it has survival value, and B, there's so much fear that we're afraid to not trust it. But all of that information is in the intellect. It is also the reasoning faculty. It is the sequential thinker. And it is the abode of the 3D I, the little I, the humanhood. That I, that center of consciousness, if you will, is in the intellect. And that, of course, is the problem. Now, this intellect, the center of consciousness is in the intellect. The consciousness is creating, the mind is forming, and the intellect is seeing what got created as a result of the center of our consciousness being within it. So do you see that nice little reflexive loop of duality and good and evil, mostly evil, and sickness and wellness, mostly sickness, and all those things?
Could you go over that again?
Yes, lots of time. Lots of time before we're done. The intellect is the storehouse of human experience, of our human experience. It has all of our history and all of the things we've been taught, and all of our conditioning is in there. All the stuff that our mothers taught us because their mothers taught them that, and our fathers taught us, and all the bad information that the schools taught us and churches taught us. It is the constructor of the house which the termites are designed to eat away in the termites book. And we, as 3D beings, live in that house. What I'm saying is that the center of consciousness from which we function is in that house of false reality. Now, consciousness is creative. It is a reflection of God's consciousness, an individualization of God's consciousness. It is pretty much separate from God as far as the ties of functionality, but consciousness is creative. What is, and mind forms what is in consciousness. Mind forms consciousness. Mind can be looked upon as a tool devised for the sake of, as a faculty devised for the sake of consciousness to see what it's like. It's like Margaret talks about, it's like a mirror on the wall that we can go look at ourselves and see what we look like. The mind is the mirror on the wall which consciousness uses to see what it looks like. This is the outpicturing of consciousness. It's a direct reflection, a mirroring they often use. Rashneesh uses that word, I know. It is a mirroring back to us of what is in our consciousness. Our individual consciousness. As interpreted by our intellect. So the loop is closed. It is a catch-22. There is no way out of that except 4D direct intervention type experience.
As interpreted by our individual intellect?
Yes. The intellect, once again, consciousness creates, mind forms, and intellect interprets. And it will always do that. Now, let me go on to intuition now. I've already touched on this. As the abode of the 3D I, as the place where the 3D consciousness lives, it is the primary imbuer of the mind. The mind, it forms whatever it's being impacted with, whatever it's being imbued with, whatever the consciousness that's in touch with it is. And so the intellect is the primary impactor of the mind. Okay, now we go to the other faculty which is there, which is intuition, which is a much higher faculty than intellect. And the intuition is the connection that we have with the 4D consciousness. And usually it just, at first, it is just the occasional hunch or the click, and that's where it starts. It is, by the way, the awareness faculty that Barbara talks about. As we gain experience with intuition as our awareness grows, the experience changes from the occasional hunch to the regular intuition. Then it changes to the experience, the actual experience of sitting in the silence, the actual experience of God consciousness, the actual experience of the flow of God into us. There's a couple other things to be said about that. Hello? Yeah. When we are functioning intuitively, there is a direct connection from the 4D consciousness, from God, to the mind, bypassing the intellect, which has no basis with which to deal with this information. It doesn't have any frame of reference. It can't cope with the intuitive thought, the hunch. It impacts the mind directly. So the alternate source of an impactor of the mind is the God consciousness.
Can you say that again? When we function intuitively, there's a direct connection between
the 4D consciousness and the mind.
Is that when you just get a click or a hunch?
When you just get a click or a hunch or an answer, or when God talks to you, or when you're actually sitting there totally immersed in the God experience, or when you cause a healing, or when you cause a change in supply, you as a practitioner working for somebody else, or when you manifest a law in California that doesn't allow continuously insured people to not be covered, or when you check an envelope and discover that for some strange people, these people this week just decided to write a $200 and $800 check instead of a single $1,000 check. I mean, I understand that there was $1,000 in there. Why they wrote 2 checks is, the fact is that through intuition, through the awareness faculty, through our awareness or realization of God, on that channel we have a direct impact in a direct impactor of the mind, a direct imbuer of the mind. This now is where our consciousness is. This is the consciousness which is creative. This is the consciousness which the mind must form, because it doesn't choose, it doesn't select. When our consciousness is in God, then the creation is godlike, then the forming is godlike. When our consciousness is in the intellect, then the creation is human, then the forming is human. That's the other channel.
Does karma come through intellect? I mean, is that where that whole thing is based?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's precisely right. I mean, you are sowing and you are reaping. I mean, now think about as ye sow, so shall ye reap. I mean, it's all being done right here. I mean, my consciousness is at a given level. I sow. My mind forms it. I see it. It comes back through my intellect. I interpret it, and here it goes again. Also now get the full implication of those things that are sown. We're not just talking about physical gifts. I mean, like we're not talking about putting out money and getting money back, or withholding money and getting withheld from. We're talking about everything is karmic, you'll understand now. Anger. If there's anger in my consciousness, the mind will form angry people. If there's love in my consciousness, the mind will form love. If there's compassion in my consciousness, the mind will form compassion. It's not limited. But the mind is imbecilic. It can't not form what is in the consciousness in the moment. It's a direct former. It has no power. It just does its job. It has the power of that mirror. exactly the power of that mirror. It reflects what's in front of it. You change your dress, that picture in the mirror is prettier or uglier. You know? I mean, it's just like that mirror has exactly the power of the mirror. And it holds the image exactly as long as the mirror. You change the dress, and the old image is not in the mirror saying, well, I liked what I had on. The image in the mirror is wearing the new dress. You know? And there is no delay, there is no recollection out in mind. The recollection is all in intellect, and the truth is all in God, and these are the two sources that drive mind. That's a lot of material, isn't it? I mean, this is the foundation of it. That's just about it. I would point out one other thing that I tell you to meditate, which is to increase your awareness, make the contact with God. I also tell you to read and listen to tapes. Now, reading and listening to tapes is reconditioning the intellect. Knocking old ideas out of the intellect and giving it new ideas. And that's certainly, I mean, you're driving to school every day and listening to Goldsmith tapes. It's deprogramming, it's deconditioning, it's retraining the intellect. And that's what that's all about. And it works. And, yes, Steve?
I just want to make sure I understand this. So intuition is a result of 4D awareness, or it's the same thing?
The word's getting used two ways.
Okay.
Intuition is the faculty which we use to contact fourth dimensional consciousness and get an awareness, is the way I would say it.
Okay. So
Barbara specifically calls it the awareness faculty, but think of it as a sense. Think of intuition as a sense like an eyeball seeing light waves.
Right.
Okay.
So this intuition, you said, affects the mind or impacts the mind.
No, the intuition
Or
when
increases.
Yeah.
Right. Increases the connection between 4D and mind.
Yes.
I wrote down bypassing the intellect.
Yes. What's going on there is you are now using a faculty which is focused on God, and while you're using that faculty rather than the reasoning faculty, your consciousness is there rather than in the intellect. And wherever your consciousness is where is the creative source. And the mind reflects the creative source.
Okay. There's a difference between individual consciousness and 4D consciousness?
We're talking that way.
Okay.
Yeah, the individual consciousness is the consciousness which doesn't know. It's back to the prodigal son story. The individual consciousness is the consciousness which is lost. It's continual total awareness of the fact that it is really God. In fact, there is no individual consciousness, but in fact, none of this that we're talking about has any reality. But while we're sitting here experiencing it, let's talk about it. Robert would say, ask who's sitting here talking about this, and write the whole thing off.
So, as fourth dimension consciousness interfaces with the mind, then our individual consciousness sees that fourth dimensional consciousness and evolves.
Then our mind forms pictures which are more akin to the creative ideas of the fourth dimensional consciousness, and we see those.
So intuition is changing what's on the mirror that our individual consciousness is seeing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. You can say it's changing, what it's doing is it's changing what is reflected by the mirror.
Okay.
And it's happening in such a way that the mind doesn't get to crank up and argue with it and talk you out of it.
So
it's a God shot.
As the funnel increases, then intellect and consciousness just vanish.
Yes. Intellect, individual consciousness becomes one with, the awareness finally is that I have always been the one.
So you're acting from
and the intellect drops to as long as you're wearing a body, there will be an intellect, but it becomes used for its purpose. And it has phone numbers, addresses, sequential thinking. It has a perfectly useful function, which it can perform very well. And it winds up being used for that.
Rather than awareness.
Rather than replacing awareness.
Rather than interpret.
Yeah, as long as you're in the 3D world, things happen sequentially, and some sequential thinking is appropriate, but it's not appropriate as far as when we're talking about reality or anything like that. It's useful to remember telephone numbers and birthdays.
This is like a battle that's going on inside of me right now. It's my intellect is interpreting events that are occurring in my life right now, but intuitively, my intuitive thoughts about what's going on is like it's all just an illusion, and my supply is like infinite, and that's the
precisely.
I think I shared about last week, but it's even more pronounced today.
Hypnotism is being cracked.
Yeah.
We're cracking it. That's what we're doing here. We're just cracking hypnotism. Yes, that's what we're talking about.
I just wanted to ask a question. So is it like mind can either be of God or of like carnal experience?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, using that word, intellect, script, human mind, human consciousness. Now, my intellect is related to all the other intellects. My intellect, part of this storehouse is the human subconscious. Okay, so to complicate the picture, now that we've got these four things down, we can think about my intellect as being connected to all the other human intellects, and that I have access to all of their bad beliefs and everything. This is the world mind that we're talking about. And last week in our discussion of the nature of error, the last 2 weeks we're talking about the world mind and that being a source of a subliminal source of bad information. And what's happening is that the collective intellect is feeding my intellect, and my consciousness is in my intellect, and whether I'm conscious of it or not, whether it's happening at a subconscious or awareness level of conscious, my center is there, and I'm manifesting whatever is going on in that function, in that house, in my intellect house. So we need to collapse that house. And that's what Paul was saying. His comment was directly appropriate for you, Steve. Paul says, choose which master you'll serve, carnal mind or you choose your master, and you can't serve both. And that's what we were talking about earlier, stand. You choose your master and you stand firm, and you see how it works out. And it's a battle. It certainly feels like a battle. There's just no doubt about that, and it will get more intense before it gets less intense. And there are lovely phrases like the dark night of the soul and crucifixion. What's happening is that consciousness which sat in the intellect and which believes all these survival principles and preservation of the fittest and all that good stuff, must be crucified. You said the individual consciousness becomes one, the intellect goes. Yeah, it goes through crucifixion. It does not go saying, well, I guess I was useless, I'm out of here. It goes by being crucified piece by piece. Okay?
It's humbled, or put into its right size.
But many parts of it must die. I mean, all these old beliefs must die. Every belief. I love the idea in AA of giving up the old ideas. Nobody ever dreams that really, literally means every idea you brought in.
Khalil Gibran talks about that under his passage about love in the Prophet. He talks all about how he says it's going to take everything you've got. It's going to drag you, and he likens it to like vegetables being harvested, like being stripped and this. It's incredible, so amazing, and it's very. It shakes you inside when you read it because you're like, oh my God, I wonder what that's going to feel like. Yeah, and it's very.
But I will tell you that if you do it consciously, if you're aware of what's going on, then as violent as it may appear, all the power is gone. I mean, the fear must be controlled. And that's a function of consciousness, you know.
That whole concept of protective work that was brought up last week is seems of more importance to me this week. Because it's and especially what you're mentioning of collective intellect. That seems to be the thing that kind of keeps penetrating.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and that reminds me, I wanted to say something about protective work because it wasn't clear to everybody last week. The reason for protective work is so that I will have at the tip of my tongue the truth during the day when I am invariably presented 100 times with a lie. When that person said, she's a teacher, she goes to school where they have flu, she doesn't take a flu shot, what do you expect? My immediate reaction was nonsense.
Or my stepmother says, I'm a mother, it's my job to worry.
Nonsense. And my immediate reaction to that was exactly the correct one. I said, that's nonsense. I didn't say it to him. He wasn't asking me for advice. He was telling me the truth. And I felt no need to correct him. But my immediate reaction was nonsense. That's a lie. And in doing so, I contributed to the healing of Diane rather than this person who was malpracticing her, who was in fact contributing to her disease. Not specifically and not maliciously, but just by that statement of consciousness, and he was contributing flu to the Teachers of America. And I had done my protective work not 30 minutes earlier, and he said that, and I said inside, nonsense. That's just hypnosis. And I dropped that with hypnosis, and I dropped Diane's flu with hypnosis, and it may or may not have helped her. It would depend a lot on how thoroughly I dropped it and how connected she was with me at the time, but that's sort of what we're talking about when we get to healing, is that kind of a thing. And, healing is about knowing the truth like that, and it's the altitude at which you know it. But, I did not malpractice her. I gave her a shot in the arm, a flu shot.
Excuse me, Joel Goldsmith talks about one of his phrases is I die hard, do you know? And this is pretty much what, it's a little odd. I mean, it's
sure.
the pain that we're going through. And like yesterday, I listened to such excruciating hatred for myself. It's like, I really am dying hard.
Is the intellect the ego? Is the intellect the ego?
It's your small.
Yeah, it's all there. It's a package. I mean, intellect.
The ego is in it.
It will get confused, since remember what we're doing is labeling and trying to put in nice little blocks so we can talk about them, things which are all a continuum. The intellect and the ego and the belief in good and evil, dualistic thinking, certainly the intellect in the sense of the storehouse of human experience, of your human experience as distinct from the reasoning faculty. Ego is all that same package, yeah. And you can attack it anywhere. You can. If you'll stop believing anything is good and evil, you will crack your ego. Barbara's axiom is, what's good for humility is bad for the ego. So anything that brings you a little humility was good for the elimination of the ego. I think it's already 8:17. I don't think we'll go any further on this tonight. We'll spend a week letting this soak in and seeing what the reaction is, and then next week we'll read from Barbara and Joel and also the holographic universe. A little bit on recognition exercises. We've done 3, the 4th one tonight. Let's go back over them. Number 1 is I recognize that since I was born human, I was born hypnotized and I've been unaware of it, which means I came into this with an intellect. And I came into this with my seat of consciousness in that intellect. I recognize that every discord, every misery, every pain that has ever come to me has been due to my acceptance of the hypnotic suggestions of this world. My acceptance, my consciousness being in them, that's the creative influence which impacts my mind, which creates every discord, forms every discord, every pain, every misery that comes to me. I recognize that the only way to become free of these limitations is to become dehypnotized, that is to destroy my conditioned belief in good and evil, that is to destroy my ego. And what we're saying here is that we need to move the consciousness out of this consciousness in the intellect creating, forming, reinforcing bad information, which the intellect then interprets and says, yeah, I knew it, and puts back into the mind. So the only way out of that loop is to destroy it. Become dehypnotized. Now, this week, I recognize that the hypnotized person cannot dehypnotize himself, but that God consciousness can and will do that if contacted. God could and would if he were sought. In case any of you are drawing any connections there, that's the intuitive faculty. That's the awareness exercise. That's growing our conscious contact with God. That is the way out. I, in that loop, will stay in that loop. I have done so 10,000 lifetimes.
Isn't that kind of what Rashneesh says when he says, how will you stop your mind with your mind?
Exactly. So sweet. How shall I stop thy mind? With my mind? And then he'd laugh uproariously at us for 3 minutes. You think it's so wonderful that I sit here before you enlightened. I think it's so strange that you sit there before me and don't know that you are. That's a good place to quit, isn't it? All right, let's get quiet for 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. So take the outlines that are there and look at them a couple of times this week and work on the 4th recognition exercise and let this soak in. It's like until you realize that we're talking about the nature of the entire 3D world, of the entire 3D universe, how you create it, how we're talking, and try to get the depth of the significance of this topic. I mean, this is what it's all about, and this is the truth that will set you free when you own it. I mean, this is the release. This is the whole thing. This is the heart of it. So, play with it all week and let it soak in, and then we'll spend another full week just right here reading from Margaret and Joel and people.